We live in a culture that treats optimism as a virtue and pessimism as a weakness. Self-help shelves are lined with prescriptions for positive thinking. Corporate culture rewards the cheerful and penalizes the doubtful. Even the psychological literature tends to treat depressive realism, the phenomenon in which moderately depressed people assess their situations more accurately than non-depressed people, as an interesting anomaly rather than a potentially important insight. William James, writing more than a century ago, had a more complicated and more honest view. In the Varieties of Religious Experience, James divided human temperaments into what he called healthy-minded and morbid-minded, or, in different terminology, once-born and twice-born. The healthy-minded person is naturally optimistic. They find the universe fundamentally good, experience suffering as temporary and exceptional, and manage to maintain their sense of the world's goodness without having to work very hard at it. Their religion, if they have any, tends to be cheerful and uncomplicated. God is good, things work out, grace is abundant. James found this temperament attractive and admired people who possessed it. But he did not think it represented the deepest or most complete form of human maturity. The healthy-minded view achieved its optimism, he noted, by systematically excluding certain things from its field of attention, by refusing to look steadily at evil, suffering, failure, and death. This was not dishonesty exactly. It was a kind of constitutional sensitivity that deflected the darkest aspects of experience. The result was a cheerfulness that was genuine but also, in a sense, purchased at the cost of range. The healthy-minded person was well adapted to easy times and prone to shattering when circumstances made the easy view impossible to maintain. The morbid-minded person, the sick soul, in James's terminology, was different. They were constitutionally unable to look away from the darker facts of human existence. They felt the reality of suffering, failure, and death with unusual force. Their inner life was marked by doubt, darkness, and the kind of anxiety that does not yield to positive thinking because it is grounded in an accurate perception of real risks. This temperament was painful to inhabit. James knew this intimately. He had inhabited it himself for years. But James argued that the morbid-minded view had access to something the healthy-minded view did not. It had access to the full range of human experience, including the parts that most people instinctively avoid. And the twice-born personality, the person who passed through genuine crisis and darkness and came out the other side with an integrated view of both the good and the terrible aspects of existence, achieved something rarer and more durable than the once-born could, a hard-won peace that did not depend on circumstances remaining favorable, a resilience that was not fragile because it had already survived the worst. This is essentially a psychological vindication of something ancient religious traditions have always known, that the path through suffering, honestly faced and not prematurely escaped, can be a path toward genuine wisdom. James was not recommending suffering or counseling against the treatment of depression. He was making an observation about the different forms of psychological depth that different life trajectories tend to produce. His analysis also contained an implicit critique of the cultural pressure toward optimism. A society that treats pessimism purely as a malfunction to be corrected by therapy, medication, or motivational intervention loses access to something it needs: the honest, unflinching assessment of things as they actually are. The pessimist, the one who cannot be easily reassured, who keeps asking why the worst case might be the real case, who refuses to look away from uncomfortable possibilities, performs a function in a healthy culture. They are the ones who notice the approaching problem before it is too late to avoid it. James did not think pessimism was the final word. He thought it was a necessary stage, that the deepest human wisdom required passing through the morbid-minded view and integrating it, not settling into it permanently. But the person who had never touched the dark side of experience, who had maintained their optimism through systematic inattention, had not achieved the deepest health. They had merely been lucky. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James to explore more of his timeless ideas.